Good morning, departure Vision 379, Juliet Mike 1.5 for 3000 and the turn to 090.
379 Juliet Mike, turn right heading 140.
Right turn 140, Juliet Mike.
379 Juliet Mike, turn right heading 180.
Right turn 180, Juliet Mike. Clear for takeoff, runway 19, 379 Juliet Mike.
Hey there, everybody. I hope you're doing well, and thank you so much for watching the channel. And thanks for supporting the channel with your questions, comments, and feedback. Today's video is going to be a discussion about the electronic flight bag that I use. In this case, it's typically Foreflight, as well as other apps that I use for flight planning. I also want to talk to you a little bit about this iPad mini 6th edition and how I use it and what its features are. I also want to show you this Arteck case. It's a protective case and keyboard for the iPad mini 6, and I really like it a lot. I'll show you some of the features a little later. So with no further ado, I will explain what I would like to do today. On Friday, January 20th, I'd like to fly to Knoxville, Tennessee from John C. Toon Airport in Nashville. So what we want to do initially is kind of take a look at these apps that I have on the iPad mini 6. Of course, I got Foreflight, which is the primary electronic flight bag I use. I have Garmin Pilot as well, but I don't use it. I have Vision ProFlight, which is a Vision Jet specific application, really good at weight and balance, fuel planning, and things like that. It's not intended to do all of the features that Foreflight provides, but it does a really nice job at the weight and balance and fuel planning. There's Stratus Insight here. Stratus Insight is another EFB that's kind of similar to Foreflight, not quite as refined as Foreflight, and not quite as many features. But one thing I do like about the Stratus Insight is the vertical depiction of weather along your route that it provides. So that's really a neat feature about Stratus Insight. It's not a very expensive app to purchase every year, so I keep using it. Again, if I'm ever planning a flight and I'm really concerned about the weather, again, it will provide me with a depiction of the en route weather in a vertical depiction. It's really, really helpful. So in terms of weather products, I typically use all of the Aviation weather products that are available through the National Weather Service. I definitely recommend those. And in terms of apps, I use, believe it or not, the Weather Channel, and this is really only used for long range planning, where you look at maybe an extended forecast for a 12-day period or a 10-day period, something well past the range in which any of these electronic flight bag apps provide. And it just gives you a summary of what might possibly be happening in terms of weather. Beyond that, Weather Channel app's not really intended as an aviator's app for real-time or flight planning, but it does give you a long-range forecast to start considering, and of course giving you situational awareness about what the weather has been doing over a period of time prior to and leading up to your flight. I really like the Windy app. Windy's a really neat app that you can use, and there's two versions, of course, the free version and a paid version. The paid version is very good and provides some additional features that the free version does not provide, but The free version is very feature rich and definitely worth checking out. So we have windy.com up, or the Windy app. Let's go and drill into the weather for Nashville and come over to Friday. During our flight time, looks like sunny skies are shown, 15-mile-an-hour winds kind of out of the northwest. Not very strong winds at all for Nashville, and that's going to stay consistent throughout the day. So then we want to kind of look at the Knoxville area over here to the east. Knoxville weather for Thursday, after we looked at that, looks like winds are going to be a little bit gusty out of the southwest. But by the time Friday comes, midday, not too bad at all. So that's what we're looking at now. So now we've made a decision that, hey, this is a pretty decent flying day. We should be able to conduct the flight into Knoxville. Incidentally, we're going there for routine maintenance of the aircraft, and it's going to be there for a few weeks. So looks like we'll have a decent day for flying on Friday. So then I want to go to ForeFlight. We've got the map screen up for ForeFlight. We got the aircraft selected, 379 Juliet Mike. The profile for our fuel performance and consumption is max cruise thrust. So let's start with a flight here. We've got John C. Toon Airport, that's KJWN. We're going to go to McGee-Tyson Airport, that's KTYS. And so we've got a straight line flight here of about 143 nautical miles. And if we're going in a straight line at 15,000 feet, we'd burn about 55.6 gallons of fuel. We would have a 35 knot tailwind. We would be arriving 11:31 a.m. or so. Why is that? Well, Knoxville's in the eastern time zone, so as we get about 40 miles to the east of Nashville, the time zone changes from central to eastern, so we'll be landing in the eastern time zone at around 11:30, 11:31. So now we can look at the routes, and in case you're not familiar, if you file IFR routes or an IFR flight plan, you generally fly recommended routes. ForeFlight does a very good job at providing you with various recommended routes. And in this case, we know that the winds for McGee-Tyson that day are going to be forecast to be out of the west-southwest, favoring runway 23 left or right. So what we want to do is pick a route that's probably conducive to an arrival for those runways. And just from prior experience, this one that starts with the Tasmo fix and ends with the Volunteer VOR, which is really close to McGee-Tyson Airport, looks pretty good. And 33 minutes of flight time, so it doesn't add much time to the flight. Fuel consumption looks like 59 gallons of fuel will be required for the flight. And there's a good chance we'll get this routing because it's been used by turboprops, jets, and pistons from altitude 7,000 feet to flight level 330 415 times. So we're going to highlight that one and select the route. And again, we can kind of view it again, heading from the Nashville area to McGee-Tyson Airport along those fixes that are depicted. And again, ultimately, the Volunteer VOR sets us up for a nice arrival into runway 23 left or right. But say, for instance, we're curious about, hey, what would it be like if we flew at a higher or lower altitude? Well, ForeFlight's really good at predicting this. Now, we're outside of the normal weather prediction window for winds. So ForeFlight uses historical information to provide us with wind conditions at this early stage of the flight plan. So at 15,000 feet, we've got 36 knots of tailwind. If we were to climb to 17,000 feet, we've got 38 knots of tailwind, and we'll save just under a gallon and a half of fuel. So if we decided to do that. But that would have us in the climb for a considerably longer period than we probably want to be or need to be. So we would probably just stay with 15,000 feet. But let's look at the opposite. Let's just say, hey, it's going to be a decent day. I want to fly at 4,000 feet because I know that that would be sufficient for obstruction clearance What does that look like? Well, 4,000 feet would give us 35 minutes of flight time and also require just under 70 gallons of fuel. We're flying at a lower altitude, thus greater fuel consumption or fuel requirements. So we want to be careful about that. So let's just select this back to 15,000 feet. That looks pretty good for now. And we're going to set the time. It's going to be a Friday flight, and we're going to go at 10 a.m. And that's looking good. So we got 10 a.m. set, 379 Juliet Mike, 15,000 feet, our routing, everything that we need here. Now, if you look at this button here, that allows us to send this flight plan that we just created over to either, we can email it to somebody, or let's move it to flights. Flights, of course, gives us a way to manage flights and drill down a little bit further in our planning process here. So again, we've got the flights here. We've got the scoreboard here showing 154 nautical miles, 32 minutes in the air. Arrival time, 11:31 a.m. Fuel required for this flight, or flight fuel anyway, is going to be 59 gallons. That does not take into consideration any IFR reserve fuel or any other additional fuel that you might want to take on board. Right now it's saying we've got a 41 knot tailwind, and of course that's based on averaging and historical data. 379 Juliet Mike, we've got the window here where we can see what the routing looks like. And by the way, any of this green weather that's depicted is not forecast weather. It's actually current weather conditions. Since we're not taking the flight today, that weather is not applicable. So we've got a routing that we've established. And now we go back down to here. You got a 225-pound pilot, 55 pounds of baggage. And I want to land with 160 gallons of fuel. So fuel at landing is 160. ForeFlight tells me that if I want to land with 160 gallons, sir, you must take off with about 221 gallons of fuel. So that's going to show 221 based upon this altitude, historical wind information, and so forth. All this is subject to change, of course, closer to the flight date, but typically is very accurate. Our flight fuel is 60 gallons. We're going to taxi and burn about 6 gallons of fuel. The fuel to the destination is about 54 gallons. And that's going to leave us landing with 160 gallons. Now, why do I want to land with 160 gallons? Well, I've already determined that the return flight from McGee-Tyson Airport to John C. Toon Airport on average takes about 75 gallons of fuel, plus, of course, the IFR fuel reserve. So I'm going to land with about 160 gallons because that's going to give me an IFR fuel reserve plus my fuel to return back to John C. Toon Airport. Now, the purpose of this flight is a maintenance flight, so the aircraft's going to be in at Cirrus Aircraft for about 3 weeks, having some routine maintenance stuff done to it. And so when I return back to the plane in a few weeks, I just want to go right to the Cirrus ramp, board the plane, do my pre-flight and everything like that, and not have to worry about grabbing any fuel for the return flight. So that's why I want to land with about 160 gallons. That's going to take care of my fuel requirements for the return trip. We can go down here and look at our weights. We want to be cognizant of our zero fuel weight, of course. We got the ramp weight here. Now we can have a maximum of 6,040 pounds of ramp weight. But in this case, with this fuel load and the payload that we've identified, we're going to take off with 5,323 pounds of gross weight, and we could be as heavy as 6,000 pounds for takeoff, so we're a little lighter than that. We do not want to land a Vision jet heavier than 5,550 pounds of landing weight, so we'll be landing with 4,957 pounds, which gives us just under 600 pounds available landing weight. We could pick an FBO. It says Signature Flight Support, which provides all the information for the FBO, but we're actually going to the Cirrus ramp. We're not even going to go to Signature. So there you go. So now fast forward, it's the day of the flight. We've filed this flight plan. We've already received a weather briefing and everything that we need. We've done everything that we need to do to meet the regulatory requirements to conduct the flight. We're aware of all relevant information that's germane to the safe outcome of the flight, and we're ready to fly. So what we can do, of course, is go to this button here and send this to Maps. And now we're sitting in the plane. We've seen the route that we filed with ATC already, and hopefully we'll get the same clearance as filed. We can actually send this very flight plan right to the avionics system of the Garmin Perspective Touch system, and we don't have to even key in any of these fixes. We just verify them and set it up as a part of the initialization for the aircraft, and that's what the nav log would look like. So that's how we use ForeFlight. That's how we do some preliminary flight planning. Of course, there's never any excuse for incomplete flight planning, so make sure you take care of everything that you need to in terms of ensuring the safe outcome of the flight. So now I want to talk to you a little bit about this iPad Mini 6. It's actually the 6th edition, and this Arteck case is really neat. So clearly what you can do is, I'll let you examine it. It's Arteck model HB342, again, made in China, 2-year warranty. Support at arteck.com if you have a warranty claim. But in any case, this particular keyboard case does a nice job. It's molded plastic, and I like it a lot. Some of the features we have, of course, is the fact that you can separate this and you have a standalone iPad case. Protects the corners very well. Gives you the ability to access the fingerprint control, and the volume control is relatively easy. The corners are quite stiff, as you might imagine, but in between is kind of a soft, almost like a neoprene. Down here is like a robust magnet type of setup here with these 3 fittings, and those 3 fittings, of course, correspond to the 3 fittings on the keyboard. So by magnetic attachment, these things come back together like this. Now, what's interesting is, of course, you can close the keyboard case like that, just like you might expect. Take it apart. And then also you can do this. And now it's folded onto itself this way. So that's the Arteck keyboard case for the iPad Mini 6th edition. It's a pretty neat case. I think it's served me well so far. In the aircraft, I don't use a mount for the iPad. I consider it to be an extra screen, and so I usually keep the iPad in the console to the left of the pilot seat. So uses for the iPad in flight, of course, is when you're running ForeFlight. You've got traffic and weather that you can look at as an additional source. You can also come into here and look at procedures, and let's anticipate that we might be landing on for the ILS runway 23 left, and now we have the iPad showing us the ILS. We can brief it off of here. We can also mark it up nicely. We need to be at 2,800 feet at Rocky Top. That is the final approach fix for this ILS. And so no matter what in flight, we have the avionics system working just fine as it should. And then we can have, of course, the iPad here showing us the approach plate for briefing purposes. It looks really good. And another thing that I like is to use the iPad for taxiing. So we say we're landing 23 left. If we were going to signature, we'd try to exit maybe Alpha 7 and enter on Romeo 5 or something to that effect. In this case, we're going to be going down to the Cirrus Vision Center. So we'll probably get off at Alpha 5, going to Alpha, and then we'll call Cirrus to get permission to go onto the ramp as we get close. But that's another way that we can use the iPad in flight. So I know that some people like to mount the iPads. I find that it's not necessary for my type of flying. It also kind of blocks the view out of the front. But with regard to that, I also find that the iPad Mini 6 is big enough and for use in flight and not too large and cumbersome. Hey, it does a nice job. So I'll put some links in the description of this video, and we'll be able to show you how to purchase this iPad Mini 6th edition and this keyboard case if you're interested on Amazon. And I hope this video was useful to you and gave you a little bit of insight about how workflows work from pre-flight planning all the way into sending a flight plan into the avionics system of the aircraft. So I appreciate you guys coming along on this video, and look forward to putting together another flight video for you soon. In fact, we might even be able to fly to Knoxville and show you that flight. So we'll see how that goes. And but I appreciate you guys coming along, and by all means, stay in touch, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks a lot.